Hey, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you are in the country. This is Zakiya, and I'm your host for Building Power. And I am joined by brightbeam CEO Chris Stewart today. What's up, Chris?
Hey, I'm happy to be here. I finally got the invitation. I'm part of the real people now.
Oh, stop it. Listen, this is well, actually I tried to have you last week, remember? And I know you had something come up, so it's
yes.
But I don't believe in coincidences, and I think it's actually perfect that you are here today to have what I believe is a very important conversation. For people who don't know, you are in Minnesota, so you're in that part of the world, and I know you and your family and everybody, all of us, have just been on pins and needles the last couple of weeks, and especially yesterday with the verdict coming down. So, yeah, I mean, we can just hop right into it. What say you? How did you feel yesterday after you heard the verdict?
What I was afraid of was that there was going to be a lot of joyous kind of clapping and happy grandstanding around, isn't this great? And the thing that I was worried about is it's going to overshadow the fact that we still don't have justice. We don't have justice in Minnesota. We have a verdict, which is different than having justice, and the systemic problems that we have in Minnesota carry on. So what got us into this situation where all of the country and the nation is looking at us, and they're seeing a black man who had a knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes, with a police officer who had the most smug, arrogant, kind of hateful look on his face while he was doing it, even as horrified bystanders are looking at it and saying, you're killing the man, right? So obviously in broad daylight, what led up to that still exists today.
Right.
So I'm happy about the verdict. I think Keith Ellison and his who's our attorney general, and his legal eagles, I think they did a really good job. But either way this was going to go, I was already thinking to myself, justice can't happen. What we could get is accountability, but we can't get justice.
Right. Yeah, I've seen a lot of takes, and some of them I'm rocking with, and then some of them I'm like, yeah. The one take that I saw that I was like, I said, that's interesting. Several people that I know and respect said, the system will sacrifice one of its own sometimes in the best interest of like their bottom line. There was a lot of property damage in the wake of George Floyd's murder. A lot of property damage, as you know, in Minnesota, really, but in other places too. Like, people piped up all across the country after seeing that video. And some people have surmised that there was a business decision made, like, y'all got to fry him. Like, we can't, because people were ready. I know people who were like prepared to go to work yesterday if they didn't come back with a guilty verdict. And I think that the powers that be knew that. I mean, the whole world watched this video, Chris. It's also an embarrassment to the United States, to other people. Like, we like to keep ourselves like insulated. We don't want like other countries that we beefing with to kind of like see what's happening and that kind of stuff. Everybody saw that video. It's been viewed billions of times, which is actually another conversation. We'll get to that later, this whole black trauma porn. But anyway, so how do you feel about that assessment?
Well, I think, what's interesting in this point that you raised right now is it is literally true that when Biden sent his ambassador over to have a joint summit with the Chinese, and that ambassador started out by talking about human rights abuses within China.
Yeah.
The Chinese response to him was George Floyd.
Yeah.
They were like, don't sit here and lecture us about human rights abuses in our country when you have racist abuses
Right.
still going on. Imagine being in a place like Minnesota where you think that nobody knows what's going on and watching, and having a man die in the street. And then somewhere along the line, the Chinese are having a meeting with the United States and they say his name.
Right.
They say George Floyd's name.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that man's death has made an international difference. Yes.
Right.
On the property crimes thing, I mean, listen, this
insurance companies. Can you imagine the amount of companies that are like, listen, y'all better do the right thing. Anybody got time for this?
There's nothing more Minnesotan than Target.
Right.
There's nothing more Minnesota than Target, and they burn Targets down. I'm not for it. I just want to be real about
I know
this.
you wouldn't. I remember that.
I'm not for it, because because number one, it wasn't us that did it.
Right.
I don't think that people know enough of that.
Yeah,
but this time around, we were infiltrated. I don't think that people know that right now Minnesota was a military state for the last few days. We have the military here. We have law enforcement from other states here. We have lockdowns. We have, like, if it would have gotten set off, we would have been in a real bad shape.
Be a real bad shape. A lot of people, and I think people knew that, but I feel like there was an attitude of some people, like they were just ready, like for whatever was coming.
Yeah, and that's what's different.
That's what's different.
That's what's different. Yeah, I mean, what's really different now, what people don't know and they should know about Minnesota, this might be true wherever you are.
Right.
We have lots of names like George Floyd that you don't know about. We have a succeeding line of Black men that have been killed at the hands of police officers in the Twin Cities that you don't know their names, you don't know about them, you don't know their stories. If you watch the Philando Castile thing, for many people, that was the first inkling that there's something wrong in Minnesota. That was the first inkling. What was different about that one was because
he had a license.
He had a license to carry. He was a school worker. He was with his, we talk about fatherlessness, people or whatnot. And here he is, a family, him, Diamond and their daughter in the car when he gets executed. But what was different about that one was that the community has been so fed up and tired over years that they were on that scene within 10 or 15, 20 minutes, right? They started collecting and gathering, and they walked directly from the crime scene to the governor's mansion and demanded accountability. That's how frustrated this community is and has been for years.
For years. I am, I lived in Ohio for a long time. I'm from Ohio, and that's actually how I feel about Ohio. And because there's been a lot of killings in Ohio of children, 12-year-old Tamir Rice, most people know about him. But a lot of people don't know about Henry Green, Tyree King, Dante and Dayton, Kylan English, although that one was not determined to be a police murder. Many people in the community believe different still to this day. I was reflecting last night that in Dayton, when that one happened, that's the closest I saw Ohio come to a rebellion since the 90s. Do you remember that stretch in the 90s where Cincinnati burned? After all, it was like 2 killings a week of Black men in Cincinnati. This was in the 90s. And I remember the city just blew up, and there was a festival, the music festival that always happened in Cincinnati every year, and it was like a big money maker. And I remember all the Black artists refused, said we're not coming back. And that is when you saw. So when people say rebellions, like a lot of people be like, oh, don't tear up property and stuff and all of this, like. I know how you feel about that. I don't. I'm serious. Like, we don't own it. No way. It ain't. People like, you tear up your own communities. We don't own SHIT in this community. So it's really not ours. But I mean, I get what people are saying. But anyway, so, and then, what ended up happening in the city was a bunch of different changes. One of them, which was that Cincinnati was like Dayton, meaning the city charter. They had a city governance structure where the city manager had all the power. They went from that to a strong mayor. And there was a couple of other different reforms that happened almost like immediately, like when money started being an issue, and of course, when the city blew up. But since then, I want to say probably hundreds have been killed by the police And people have just been, you know, I don't know. I'm
Part of
very
the conversation nationally, people who are having the conversation are saying that basically police killings are, number one, rare, and number two, that they don't have the empirical evidence that they are racially unjust in their application. Like when we talk about murders, I don't like to get into stupid arguments with people nationally or whatnot, because quite obviously, if you were detached from the communities, and I see black and white people of the upper middle class and the middle class having these conversations, and they want to, like, because they think of it as an abstract situation, they want to kind of belittle the prevalence and how big a problem it is. I can tell you this much: in Minneapolis and in North Minneapolis, there is a very big difference between when you drive through the communities of color than when you drive through the white areas of Minneapolis, in terms of how much contact you have with police officers, how they treat you and talk to you, and when you have interactions with them, even if they don't kill you. So let's stop making it about police killings. Let's also make it about how many times they throw people up against walls, how many times they grab youth and let youth know very clearly, you do what I say right now, and empty your pockets and get off your bike. And didn't I tell you to do this and that and the other? If you grew up in that environment with that type of relationship with the police officers, of course your opinion is going to be different about them than people that live in these la-la worlds, these Pleasantville worlds where police officers are there to serve and protect and all of that nonsense. So I'm sick of bougie people, black and white and brown and other colors, having ridiculous conversations about whether or not there's really a problem with policing. That's the dumbest conversation we could possibly. Policing is the problem, period. We don't need to be police. We all want safety. We all want to be safe and secure, but public safety and policing are not the same thing.
It's not the same. I had to say that on Boyce's show last night. I was like, we don't realize how indoctrinated that we are to say, see, police equals safety. Even if with Black people, with all of the evidence that we have, centuries literally of evidence that the police have never meant safety for us. And we still be like, well, we just want to be safe. And I'm just like, what I also feel like a part of the trauma has impaired our imaginations. And I'm not pathologizing us, but when I hear those arguments, that's what I think. I'm like, we can't even imagine anything different. And that hurts.
Well, I mean, like, we do have like situations in our communities where there is Black victimization too. So like some of the biggest victims of crime in our communities are Black people, right? Like, so the victim class. So of course people want some form of protection and safety, and they'll reach for whatever they can at times. They can reach for whatever they will get. But the point, the point that you just made is still true though. Policing doesn't equal public safety. If it did, let's just put it this way. For the last 10, 15, 20 years, we have been militarizing the police and providing them with tools they never had, and increasing their budgets and increasing their budgets and their bottom lines. Have we become safer? Are our communities safer? Is Chicago any safer than it was before we militarized the police officers?
I think I saw a stat on Twitter. I wished I had captured it, that they spend $5 million a day on cops. In Chicago. I was like, that sounds outrageous to me. $5 million a day. Do you know what they could do with that money? It shouldn't be no homelessness.
That's right.
No kid should go hungry. Are y'all serious?
That's right. How much do they spend on out of school time activities for young people in Chicago? How much money is in their budget for that?
Conversation.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. If you want just cities that are just and built on justice for children, because children don't vote, they get lost in the priorities. They get lost in policy priorities. So Chicago, I hate to keep beating up on them. You and I talked about this before. They get all this federal money that comes to the city, and their mayor makes the decision to put 75% of that money into the police department, right? Now, my question about that is, what could you have done with that money that would have made your city more just and a safe and healthy place for young people to live, besides putting it, almost all of it, into police, right? And she's not that mayor of Chicago is not the only one you and I can make that question to, put that question to.
Without a doubt. There's plenty of mayors that are still doing that. And people have been calling for not just defunding the police, but reducing the police budget and actually putting it into things that actually help people. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
more housing, jobs programs, like all kinds of things. And even that is a fight, Chris. Like, it's like people are like, okay, y'all not ready for defund the police, but how about we just reduce their budget, right? And let's actually fund things so that we won't always have a need for the police. You know what I'm saying? And even that's a fight.
Well, I mean, look at what happened in the United States when we closed down mental health services for millions of Americans.
Yep.
All of a sudden, homelessness skyrocketed and the need to police mentally ill people skyrocketed at the same time. So that's a policy trade-off. You reduce services to mentally ill people or people who are experiencing mental illness in some way in the United States. Once you cut that, you need more police. Why? Because you have more people living on the street who are homeless, who don't have adequate services or housing, who suddenly need to be policed because you're not taking care of them in the way that we used to do, right?
Right.
These are policy priorities. These are choices.
It's a policy. That's what, thank you. It is a policy decision. Everything from what we see happening with these ballooning police budgets to the fact that there's even in some cities, like there are school buildings that have not been repaired in decades, right? Like, but you'll take the money that probably should be going to some of the schools and all kinds of other services. There are communities across this country that don't even have rec centers for kids and wondering why they still getting in trouble. So now let's talk about child justice, because to me, this is all interwoven. Like, and I know, child justice, that's like one of your euphemisms. You'd be making up all kind of words like Jesse Jackson.
You got to do it. You got to do it. So keep hope alive.
So what is child justice mean to you, Chris?
So first, I would say that child justice means to me that you recognize how politics works, and you recognize that children get lost in the priorities of other items that mayors, city council members, elected leaders, elected officials, appointed officials, the things that they prioritize are often things that don't make for a healthy city for children. They prioritize the business community, real estate development. They prioritize things that, affect the so-called bottom line. They work with unions and others to really think about jobs and workplace environments and all of that. But you also starve the things that make life good for young people in cities, and specifically in cities like, I always point out San Francisco, Seattle, Austin, the Twin Cities, these places that have relative abundance going on, meaning that they are not broke. These are not poor cities. These are cities with lots of college educated people making lots of money and building condos everywhere. And when I say that the children are lost in the priorities, they are opening coffee shops and yoga studios and bike lanes and all kinds of other things that get prioritized. You want to get a condo built, whatever, we'll throw some money at you. We'll throw taxes at you. But you have children in those same cities who've never seen an animal that isn't a cat or a dog, meaning they haven't ever been to the zoo. The museums are closed to them. The out of school time budgets are really low. So a child in one part of Seattle or one part of San Francisco will never enjoy the benefits of their world-class city that all these mayors are touting. Child justice is turning that on its head. The first should be last. Our youngest people, our youngest citizens should be first in line for access to power, access to policy priorities, access to all that they need. There should not be a hungry child. There should not be a child that doesn't have access to a great learning environment that sets them up for success in life and a personally meaningful life for them. There should not be a single Black child in San Francisco or Latino child in Seattle or even a white child on WIC in any of these cities, in the Twin Cities, who's not enjoying the full benefits of their city. What is a civilization that doesn't care about its young people? What is it? Can you call it a civilization? You can't. So I know I went long on that, but you hit my button.
No. That's it. No, I feel like that's everything. One of the things that I've been struggling with is, and I don't know how you and your wife are handling this, but one of the things that I've been struggling with recently is how to talk about all of these police murders, high profile murders, with children, because like my son is 13, the young man in Chicago was 13, that the police, the Latino young man that the police murdered. The police killed a 15-year-old who was in crisis in Columbus, Ohio last night. Literally at 4:30, like between 4:30 and 5, as the verdict was being read for Derek Chauvin, Columbus police shot a 15-year-old girl 4 times in the chest. And I'm just, a part of me is like, I don't want to how do I say this? Like, just continue to share like the bad news. But a other part of me is like also not wanting to be an ostrich and not talking about it at all. So I feel like a part of that has to fit into some child justice too. And I'm not like figuring out how to have the conversation.
Well, at the end of the day, we're trying to raise free people, right?
Yeah.
Like we're trying to raise free Black people, which is something America has never been in favor of. Right. So on one hand, everything that we do for them should make them strong. Yes. And I think facts make them strong. I think like facts and information make them strong. I don't think trauma porn does, though. Right.
No, exactly.
So age appropriate
videos, definitely no videos. Yeah.
Not the videos, not the things that have them waking up in the middle of the night thinking someone's going to come in my house and grab me or whatever, you know. And one thing I will say, like, this is not going to be a successful answer to what you're raising right now, Zakiya. But one of the reasons I left the Twin Cities and went out more into the country is so that I could have a little bit more control just over my house and my kids where we live. And I'm not by myself. There are a lot of people of color that are moving further out into the country. There's a lot of people that move down south, not to the cities, but outside of the cities.
Back. Yes.
Yeah. And they are buying bigger pieces of land.
Yep.
And isolating themselves in ways in which they can create a healthy environment. We're not all city people. We're not all looking to be, because the cities right now, you're fighting an uphill battle with your children, raising them in some of these cities where you got problems with the schools and the police and everybody else. And you're still trying to have your kid just be a happy, kind of funny, fun-loving child. You're trying to raise children that are children.
Free.
Yeah. And cities are making it hard. Right. I rest a lot of this at the feet of our elected leaders. Minneapolis has a very weak mayor. They have a stronger police.
Oh my God! I saw his comment yesterday. I wanted to smack him. I did. What? And it's almost like the white Democrats had a meeting because Nancy Pelosi said some wild shit too.
Our governor, the mayor of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis specifically, they're on some other planet. Right. And they like to start everything with, we're a great place to live, except for the Black people. So we got to do something for them. And it always starts with the same. We're a great place to live. We're a great place to live. Minneapolis, like many cities, is a tale of two cities. And the children in those cities are living in two different realities. The children of North Minneapolis and the children of Southwest Minneapolis are living on two different planets. Right. In the same city. I can guarantee you that the children of North Seattle and the children of South Seattle are living in two different worlds. Can guarantee you that that's not rare.
It is not rare. I can think of every city, like even where I live at in Montgomery County, Maryland, there's a East County, which is a euphemism for more working class people of color. And then, of course, Bethesda and the Real Housewives of all of that, you know. There's definitely differences no matter where you are. And to me, that has been, I believe, like white money people specifically have been very strategic about carving out their enclaves, no matter what community, even in DC, right? Like even when it was Chocolate City, white people had their enclave. You know what I'm saying? Where as Black people, you knew. Like, I mean, it's like, you knew, okay, don't go over there kind of thing. Like, I mean, that happens still to this day. You know, and that is not child justice at all.
No, if you ask what child justice is and look at a situation like that, you would have to ask yourself just repeatedly, is this just?
Right.
Like when you look at the different lives of children living in your city, ask yourself a very real question. Is this just? If it's not just, any policy, any situation, when I just said a child in North Seattle and a child in South Seattle are living two different lives, and you ask the question, is this just? Your answer has to be no. And if your answer is no, then you have to ask the next question is, what's the action to make it just? Like, what do we need to do to make it just? Our cities should work equally well for everyone, right? That's the bottom line. Chicago is not working equally well for everyone. Chicago is not policed equally well for everyone. Its healthcare system is not working equally well for everyone. It's not just.
No.
That's just not justice.
No, it is absolutely not justice. The thing that that I think that just makes me more angry is because a lot of times we don't have like the real conversation about like, how do we get to justice? And it literally means people giving up, like white money people giving up their access to different things, giving up their special privileges, and giving up some of their wealth to make a more just society. I see no evidence that they're willing to do that.
Now I'm going to challenge you on this one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, here's my challenge to that one. Yes, and our people of color, of the middle class and upper middle class.
Oh yeah, they adopt the same things.
They adopt the same things.
Yeah.
And there are ways in which once they get their little something, their neighborhoods and their whatever, they start looking at other parts of the city the same way the white folks do, like anybody else, you know. And they become part. It's partially because they start having Black privilege in some cases and benefiting that they're silent. And the only reason I want to challenge you and put this one out here, it's not really a challenge to you. The only is that when they get elected, they are silent on some of the things that their own people need them to be more vocal about. Here in the Twin Cities, the handful of Black electeds that we do have could be doing more to speak out on behalf of the communities that they supposedly represent. And if it wasn't for activists in the street, half of what you know about the activism in the Twin Cities you wouldn't even know about it. It's not even going on. It is not because of our bougie Black leadership in the Twin Cities at all. It is because of activists in the street that you're even hearing any rumblings about justice in the Twin Cities.
Oh, I already know. Like, don't get me started on that. I mean, to me, I feel like that's two separate conversations. But yes, like the Black Bourgeoisie, E. Franklin Fraser, that is a book recommendation for everybody. That's Our right. Kind of People. The author is losing me right now, but that is another offering a book selection that goes into depths in sort of some historical analysis, like even around like Black elite societies like Jack and Jill. What's the other one? The Links. And like, we probably gonna get lit up in the comments now, but I'm not like hating on. No, seriously.
Come with it. I don't care. Come with it, because do you know how old I was before I knew that there was such thing as a Jack and Jill?
Exactly. Me too. I
never knew it existed. Yeah, I was a grown person. Right.
When I was like, oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yes. That exists? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hopefully my husband's not watching, but he comes from a family, Black middle class family, comes from a line of educators, and his great aunt actually used to be the president of Jack and Jill.
Wow.
And he and I
secret society.
I was just like going off about it one day, and he just let me, and then he was like, well, my aunt Eleanor actually used to be the president of Jack and Jill. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, dear. But he had a different perspective, you know what I mean? And I just thought that was really interesting, because I'm not even used to even being connected to even other Black people who have that kind of, what really that is also Black, but it's also class privilege. Because I believe in the links, in the links there, I believe there's some like requirements, like you have to be kind of like interviewed and all of that kind of stuff. Like you got to be just like the kind of Black person that's as close to the white as you can get in thinking.
Well, and I think this is why, like, I don't like beating up on Black people who do well in life, and I don't like us getting into our own kind of internalized racism with each other. I do think that the Black upper class and middle class have internalized racism about the Black underclass, working class, that they let fly freely often, but I do think it's important to bring up because in many of these cities where we want child justice to take place,
You got black
these are
mayors.
either black mayors or black electeds. They're very
Yep.
democratic, like Democratic Party,
All the cities are run by Democrats.
I mean,
Where,
if you think about Minneapolis and we're talking about injustice right now, you can't get elected to anything in Minneapolis as anything other than a Democrat. Right.
right.
And so if you are black and you want to do well, first of all, you're a Democrat. Number two, you toe the party line, and the party
Yep.
line oftentimes has
Is
parameters
anti-black.
where
Yep.
there's things you can't talk about. There's things you can't do. I know as a former elected official in Minneapolis, I can tell you it's a fraternity, and the
Yep.
fraternity produces and rewards bland milk toast, black
Ooh.
people of color.
Yep.
People of color, and it punishes outspoken people who want to see change in the systems.
That's not just Minneapolis.
So.
I have to share because I'm in Maryland now, and I've learned so much about Maryland politics because this is actually a so-called deep blue state, not just the city, right? So it's outside of Baltimore and the county. We have a county form of government in a lot of the other counties. Baltimore is different. That was some white racism stuff too, to call Baltimore, the city of Baltimore. They literally called the city of Baltimore out of Baltimore County and was like, y'all be that over there in the county. We don't do this.
Yeah.
Yes. You know what I'm saying? So, but shout out to State Senator Jill P. Carter. She was one of the black electeds that actually did represent the people in her community. She actually did get elected, and she went against the party line, and actually Democrats sought to punish her in a lot of different ways. She has all kinds of seniority, which is usually kind of how you get catapulted to committee chairmanships and things like that. She's been passed over and over again. She was the so-called squad before the squad, but not necessarily about like the issues that I know that you would have challenges on, but she was calling for police accountability for years. You know what I mean? It couldn't get any headway with Democrats. That's what I'm saying, because it was an issue that was a black issue, Chris. It was a black issue in Maryland, and it is still a black issue in Maryland. And so now this year, they finally got all of this police reform stuff. And wouldn't you know it, all these Democrats want to step to the front with their chest out like they always been like this. I think they're going to tamp down that this black woman. And so it was so many community groups that stood up and was like, oh, no, we're not going to let people forget that Jill Carter started this, a black woman. And she also comes from a civil rights family. Her father was also, Walter P. Carter was a very staunch civil rights advocate in Baltimore back in the 60s and 50s.
I mean, that's the type of community feedback that we need. Like when what you just mentioned, the community saying, no, we're not going to let her stand out alone and whatever. We need the community to do that, because I think the community goes soft sometimes on our black electeds and let them do business as usual. Well, we have seen like Nakima Levy Pounds here, or Levy Armstrong here in the Twin Cities, Leslie Redmond, but many others before them also have been marginalized for calling out the politicians, because it's a choice that politicians make to not see our issues for what they are sometimes. And if we allow them to make the wrong choices on those, not support the right things or whatnot, they will, because it's to their benefit to not be outspoken. But we just can't let the importance of our children is so big. It is so high. It's such a burden. It is, to live out, to be good descendants of our ancestors and good ancestors to our future, people. We have to call out things where we want to call them out for justice purposes, like for our children. And I'll give you an example. The mayor of St. Paul in our Twin Cities, Mayor Carter, Melvin Carter, he too comes from a civil rights background. His family is known as civil rights people or whatnot. So he is governing different. He just acts different as a new mayor. He's the first black mayor of that city. He's younger. He's open to things like you and I have talked about this. There are mayors like in Jackson and in Stockton and in other places that are making the choice to not be the way that the traditional black leadership has been. They are pushing very progressive things in their cities, like UBI, like universal basic income. And you had someone on the show about the reparations
Yes.
stuff that
In
passed
St.
in St.
Paul.
Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, in St.
That was
Paul.
amazing.
That's a choice. You
Right.
can choose to do the right thing. You can choose to push policy that is a little bit that pushes the envelope.
Right.
Right. Because how wrong is it to push the envelope on things like our rights and civil rights and righting historic wrongs? But match that up now against Zakiya. Like you talked about what's going on in St. Paul. Now match that up against a mayor in Chicago.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Like look at the difference.
Yeah.
Look at the difference. Two different like Lori Lightfoot in Chicago is not to light her up, but it's just to basically say she can make different choices than what she's making right now.
But she's not.
But she's not. Right. And that tells me that children are not a priority because the children of Chicago are suffering. The children in Louisiana as a whole state are suffering. You know, we could go city after city and children are suffering. They need strong, upstanding leaders who are going to push the envelopes on. You know what we should do, Zakiya? I think I have a different idea. See, talking to you always gives me good ideas. I think we should just start calling children real estate investors.
Wow. That'll get some attention.
Yeah, if we just call them real estate investors, then all of a sudden everybody will be interested in their issues.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we should do. Get children to wear t-shirts that say, I am a real estate investor. And suddenly the
Mayor Bowser in DC will definitely pay more attention.
See, I mean, if you think about the cities
Don't
that
get
we're
our
in,
activists started on her.
Yeah. Well, what would they tell us about DC? Like the mayor, what you said used to be Chocolate City. They have a black mayor.
It's more like a mocha latte city now. The DC's black population is barely hanging on to its majority. And I think it's interesting because if you notice, like there's a lot of energy towards statehood now. And I listen, I don't have a dog in the fight, whatever, right? But I think is interesting. But when Marion Barry and other black folks, when it was still very much a very black city, were pushing for it, Democrats as an institution wasn't on board. Now Democrats as an institution, as you see, is moving finally in the House. They're on board with it being the 51st state. And I just can't get over the fact that there's been large demographic shifts.
Well, and you know, everybody is doing a Hunger Games thing on how they're gonna stay relevant. So they are fighting for Republicans and Democrats are fighting for future voters.
Oh, like, that is what the Republicans say. They're saying that, you know, Democrats are trying to, like, you know, get 2 more Senate seats. And based on what I'm hearing about what they're trying to do with the Supreme Court, that might not be too far out argument.
Yeah. I'm done with the parties. Like when I think about things like justice for our people,
got to be done with the parties.
And you got to be done with parties because both have a hand in our oppression.
Yes.
Both are still pushing policies that are dangerous for us, that harm us. Our numbers are not good. They're dwindling. All indicators of how healthy and how successful you can be in life are not working in our favor right now. We talk about everything from mortgages and bank loans and jobs and income and interest rates that we get on car loans and payday loans and everything else. I can name you name me an area of life activity and I can tell you the statistics aren't working in our favor. And I can tell you ways in which both, so-called both of the parties and their politicians and their pandering people in those parties are not working for us. And we just got to be very, very clear about what we want. First of all, no matter what, how are the children is the most African of questions ever. How are the children? And if we answer that question wrong and we say they are not good, everything else is wrong.
Right.
Nothing else is good. And I'm telling you, like right now, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but for anybody listening or watching or whatnot, I am sick of our leading institutions, organizations, even civil rights groups that don't even have a tab on their issues list for education or for young people.
Isn't that amazing?
It's
They've
amazing.
Given up. They've given
totally
up on education.
Totally
I can't believe that.
Right.
I believe this is probably the first century that Black people, I would say like the Black, you know, we were talking about upper class elite, like they've given up on education. Education was always a leading issue for us. Do you have thoughts about how that happened?
I mean,
because I'm still thinking about it.
I believe that within civil rights theory for a long time, there was the belief that the major problem was that we didn't have an opportunity to learn, not that we couldn't learn. I think over time, with holding schools accountable, holding teachers accountable, holding school systems accountable, and putting in measures that gave back numbers and told us that they weren't being accountable and that they weren't being very good at their job, what happened was they switched from it's not about opportunity to learn, it's that you can't learn. Your brain is smaller. You're poor people. And we have Black people who are educated with money, who themselves are pushing scientific racism on our people. Educational essentialism, which basically says, show me your demographic and I'll tell you how well you're supposed to do in school. And if you're poor and you're Black, you can't learn. Right? Even though we have schools that have proven that wrong, we have pedagogies that have proven that wrong, we have science that proves that wrong, the educational essentialism took over at some point. So in the 80s or the 60s, the 70s, it was, we're being prevented from getting into schools where we could do better. The idea was we're being blocked from opportunity, not that there's anything wrong with us with our brains. There's nothing wrong with us as people. At some point that switched. That like switched to, oh, no, poor people can't learn, right? Even middle-class people saying that nonsense, right? And
that's absolutely racist. That's scientific racism. And
scientific racism
is eugenics. And that lets you know that eugenics never really left. No. Like people are still pushing these ideas. No. And there is actually still even being pushed in the academy and the university. They just don't call it eugenics anymore.
Educators and their unions and their associations and their conferences and their research that they trade with each other are trading things that say like Black brains are smaller because of poverty. And I'll show you the science that says it, not at all questioning how many times in the past, how that exact same thing was said in the past and how it connects to, oh, no, but we're not meaning it the way that we used to mean it before. We're just saying that, poverty is so traumatic that you can't learn because it actually makes your brain smaller. Black people have been in poverty and trauma for years, and the largest acquisition of any population of literacy took place with the people who were freed from slavery. In the 40, 60 years after slavery, the acquisition of literacy of people who came out of the most poor and most traumatic situation couldn't have been stronger as a trend than any other time in history, right? Yep. So the idea that an urban kid in Dallas or in New York or something can't learn because their brain is smaller, because they're poor. It sounds good in theory to the educators who want an excuse to not educate, but it shouldn't sound good to any of the rest of us. That's straight up scientific racism. And they want to distract you. Zakiya, we might have different opinions about this, but they will talk about eugenics with things like, oh, standardized testing is eugenics. Right?
Yes.
I feel like the devil just like will throw you a curveball to make up look down and right look left in so many weird ways, and you'll fall for it every time. The one way that we know there are disparities in schools is because we have data that tells us so. So if you want to erase the data that shows us where the disparities are, but call it woke, I'm just going to be like, I don't know what type of planet we're on right now. Of course, I want the information and the data that shows that there are disparities in schools and where they are and which schools are the biggest offenders with it and which classrooms are the biggest offenders with it.
But my issue with that, though, like we've had this data for decades. They still ain't doing shit to change it.
But that doesn't make me want to get rid of the data. We've had data that police officers are corrupt and discriminatory too. Exactly. But we don't want them to we don't want them turning off their body cameras, right? Like what cops will say is, cops will say, well, we don't need body cameras. We already know, everything we need to know. And I will say, no, no, we don't. No, turn that camera on. Right. Yeah. There is no system that polices us, teaches us, educates us, processes us in any way in which I want them to turn their body cameras off. I want all the data. Right. And the reason I want all the data is we have civil rights lawsuits going all over the place. And every time that you have one of those lawsuits, the first thing you do is pull the data. So if someone has dumped the data, Zakiya, how many times have we seen nobody get in trouble for cops turning off their body cameras so a case goes bad because, somehow the camera just went off, right? We have seen, I just saw as recently as a couple of days ago, a cop who was caught on camera,
Yeah.
who had turned his camera off. He was planting drugs.
Yeah.
But there was somebody with a video camera, with a cell phone, who caught him actually taking it out of his pocket and was placing it, but his body camera was off.
Yeah, he turned it off.
He turned his body camera off.
That was in Baltimore.
Was it Baltimore?
I know that happened in Baltimore. It might have happened somewhere else, but what you're talking about happened in Baltimore.
No, I want all the data. I want all the data that tells us we live in an unequal society, and I don't want any guesses. Like, oh, we don't need the data because we already know that Black kids aren't doing as well as white kids in school. That's not a reason to get rid of the data in my mind. I actually don't want to make an emotional case. I want to make a fact-based case. And I want you to know that there are certain schools that are knocking it out of the park with the kids of color, right? And those schools are all different kinds, right? Afrocentric schools, private schools, district schools, magnet schools, whatever. You can find examples of us doing well, but you can only know that they're doing well because you have the information, you have the data.
Yeah. Do you think there are socioeconomic differences in outcomes for children, Black children, in terms of if they come from a higher earning family with more resources?
I think it's really interesting to me because this is one of the, yes, I do think that there's differences in economic differences in outcomes. So right. That's just across the board. And you will find that. What you will find is, I think it's like something like 75% of poor white kids are in schools where the majority of the kids are middle class. So just let that sink in for a second. The majority of poor white kids are in schools with other white kids that are the majority of the population is actually middle class or up.
Wow.
Yeah. The majority of our kids that are poor are in schools where everybody's poor. Right. Yeah. So it's a different form of kind of like compounding
and white
segregation.
People will fight you. These are some of the biggest fights. What's that thing? Nice white parents. They will fight you to keep these damn kids out of their schools too. The Black poor kids, not the white poor kids.
That's
the Black poor kids. They will fight you, and they be liberal and be like, "I voted for Barack."
That's right. I voted for Hillary. I voted for Barack.
I am not racist.
No, I'm not racist. I just don't want your Black kids.
Just not in my neighborhood.
Right.
Black lives matter, just not in my school, my kids' school.
But you know what? Here's one of the things that I didn't say in that's like a little bit scandalous is that Black people at all levels still have a gap.
Oh, so yeah, it's true.
Black middle class kids who get out to the suburbs and these the land of milk and honey, there's still a gap. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about that much. So when people talk about, it's because you're poor, or
it's because racism,
it's because the system's not working well.
Race is the common denominator, and not economics all the time.
Do you remember? I've shown it on my show multiple times. The New York Times did this graphic that showed the number of people that are born Black in the upper class who fall out of the upper class.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes. Yes.
So they had white and Black in the
It was Robert Wood Johnson that did that study. Said that Black males can be born into middle class and upper middle class families and not continue to be middle class. Yeah. I mean,
the ones that fall to the bottom.
Yeah. Some of them, these were wealthy men at some point. Yeah. Not wealthy. I mean, wealth is different, but they were rich and still.
Well, the thing question you have to ask yourself is how many of our stereotypes are beat up when you look at that particular phenomenon? Because if you are growing up with wealthy parents, or at least affluent in some way, shape, or form, and you have two parents, and they are more educated, and you're still falling out of the class. Now there's something about because we love to talk about fathers being absent. We love to talk about the culture. We love to talk about poverty being the problem and driving the problem.
White supremacy and racism. Yeah.
There you go. Everything about white supremacy and racism. And Sharif says this all the time. Sharif El-Mekki, who does my Freedom Friday show with me, my colleague, my brother, he talks about how a lot of people are not trying to end white supremacy. They're only trying to improve their position within it. Mm-hmm. And he's usually talking about us, when he says that. Oh, yeah. People of color. Yeah, you want to improve your position within it. Upper class, even though their children might still be falling out, that upper class oftentimes won't get out there and talk often about these issues and these problems. I just want to say to you, I think like I have so much respect for the fact that there are people like you who are going to constantly, like, you're just reliable. We know that you're going to push the right thing. You're not going to have any fear about saying the thing that's going to free our people or free our children. And that is an example, and that is a model that we need more of, because our people are scared. Our people are scared to talk.
So I see that a lot. The fear is paralyzing in a lot of ways. I appreciate you saying that, Chris. One of the final questions I wanted to ask you before we wrap up is still in line with what we're talking about. You know, we have majority white teachers. What are your thoughts? What, if any, because I've seen a few posts about this. My sister, Dr. Kalila Harris over at CAP, I saw her post about, I think she said, good morning to everybody except for white teachers who are not allowing, or she didn't say white teachers, except for teachers in general who are not allowing space for their students to process, not even asking them questions. How are you? You know, what are your thoughts on that? Do you even think that is, I guess, especially if the teacher already is racist, like, is that the place? I mean, I'm serious, because I'm on the fence with that. Like, I might not even want these teachers saying that, you know what I mean?
So, and I just talked about this on my show this morning a little bit. Like, we have to be really careful about who we're putting our kids into their hands every day, like whose hands we're putting them in. If a teacher isn't qualified to help my student understand their place in the world and how to deconstruct the world and how to think about it, and how to know the facts behind the basis. Like now, all of this going on to a Black child who is going to school today in Minneapolis public schools, the idea that their entire city is overtaken by tanks and armed guards from the military and whatnot would not be a part of the discussion today about, this is how the state works. This is how policing works. This is how the statistics look. Like, the factual basis for understanding the world that you live in. If your teacher's not qualified to do that, fire that teacher, get your kid out of that school. Think about it deeply, because, man, think about the educational malpractice that is visiting the Black children of America today. Today, there's no bigger victim in the United States to educational malpractice than the Black child. And a lot of it is true. We are putting them in that position, which, think about that, Zakiya. Your child knows that you love them so much. So if you ever put them in a situation, their thinking is, this must be good or right, or because my parents endorsed this. They put me here, so this must be good. Think about that. I know you want to wrap, but think about that in a situation like the story we saw last week or the week before, where there were the 3 Black kids at a daycare who are sitting there without their food as all the white kids.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
I can't explain the level of anger, because thank goodness. Can you imagine how long that's been happening? Number one.
That's right.
That wasn't the first day they did that. And to me, yes, I thought about what kind of messages at 3 years old that these children are being socialized into accepting. Oh, white people are supposed to eat first. White people are privileged. White people get this first, right? Like, there's
you
kids
could kind of see
there.
in the pictures, you could kind of see their face. They were like,
they was just sitting there quiet.
Like, where's my food?
This is normal.
Right? This is normal. And they had to think to themselves a little bit like, this is where my parent drops me off to. This is an extension of my home. So this must be kind of right. That's got to be the cognition of a child, that if you love them and they know you love them and you put them in that situation, they have to be thinking that somehow this is right. So, my final thought on all of this, I would say, is to make sure that your kids are, that you're thinking really diligently and militantly about where you place your kids, whose hand, because their intellectual development doesn't happen more than once. You don't get that over again. You don't get 5 years old again. You don't get 7 years old again. And then once you got it kind of set up for your children, like I've done a lot to make sure that I've created kind of an enclosed environment for my children to grow, so that I can help them grow the way they need to grow rather than the way that the world wants them to grow. But if you do get in that situation, which you're fortunate and blessed by God to be able to have that situation, you do have to think about other children too. There are 8 million Black children in American public schools that we have to be thinking about. Are their cities just? Are their cities affording them all the opportunities to learn,
No.
to grow, to experience life as a kid? Are there enriching opportunities that are provided by all this money and all this wealth in this super rich country where people are Instagramming pictures of golden toilets and stuff, right? Are we making sure that our kids are getting like even a modicum of that wealth put into their healthy development and growth? And you and I both know the answer to that is no.
Is no.
That's a no. It's a no for me, dog.
Right. That's what the mayors need to be saying. That's exactly what they're saying with their policies and practices. It's a no for me, dog, when it comes to these kids, especially our children of color and poor children, like you said, just in general, because there's some, what do you call them, hollers or something? I've hollers in Kentucky and like southeastern Ohio, where there's like a bunch of poor white people, in West Virginia, like the whole state is poor and white. You know, I mean, there's Black people there, but yeah, it's like the socialization of, and you might not agree with this because this man was a socialist. He was also a little racist too. Eugene Debs.
Then I'm really not going to agree with it.
Eugene Debs. But I think he was right with this quote. He said the reason why socialism never took hold in America is because Americans think they are temporarily poor capitalists or some shit. And to me, it made sense because when you listen to like some of the rationale, it sounds like Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even from white people, you'd be like,
yeah, I mean, like that'd be a whole different show. But
that's a whole different show. You're
right. This
is
what I will say about this. I will say, I try to.
Temporary embarrassed millionaires. That's what he said. They're temporary embarrassed millionaires.
They think they're going to be rich.
Do you know how many people think that they have a shot at being a billionaire? And I mean, just basic math should tell you, especially if you coming from a poor family, right?
Yeah, yeah.
No,
I will say this much.
This is what I think.
I think white supremacy and global white supremacy will catch you under communism, socialism, capitalism, democracy, non-democracy. Yeah, I don't care what your system is. White supremacy and the global white project will catch you under any system. So I think I focus on my freedom and my liberty. And so the debates between the Jacobins and the capitalists and whatnot, I do know this much. I will tell you this much. I'd rather own my own stuff than not. I don't trust the government enough to hand over all of my kind of like life important things to them, like education. I don't like them being the only actor or player in anything. I don't trust this government. I don't trust the state enough to be a statist, to be a person who believes so I get the socialism talk, but I mean, listen, some of the biggest people, like you and I had these conversations, some of the biggest politicians pushing this pseudo socialism come from states where there are no Black people, and where there are, like Vermont, for instance, they're like a national leading incarcerator of Black males for some reason. And you have to ask yourself, well, wait a second, now y'all got some of the biggest socialized systems in the country, and you still haven't got race right. So I'm a race man. Like, I think billionaires are doing jacked up things, and they're running our government in ways. I think our government is doing things jacked up. Like it wasn't,
that's and not wrong.
Right. Like billionaires didn't have their knee on the neck of George Floyd, right?
Yeah.
That was a state agent. That was an agent of the state.
Agent of the state.
Agent of the state. And thank God for Keith Ellison, who's the attorney general, who also works for the state, because there's a lot of states where the attorney general wouldn't have pushed that hard on this case.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even try.
We know. In John Crawford's case, the now sitting governor of Ohio was actually the attorney general at that time, refused to prosecute the killers in Tamir Rice's case. In John Crawford's case, I don't know if you remember John Crawford. That was the brother at Walmart.
The Walmart,
in Dayton. That's the suburb right outside of Dayton. And I really think Beaver Creek should have burned down. But anyway,
who is that attorney general?
Oh, he's the current governor of Ohio, Mike Dewine.
Wow, I did not know that.
He was the attorney general at that time. I was still living there. Yeah.
I mean, this is, man, like I saw something recently. I don't know if you do the TikToking. I'm not too old for TikTok.
I need to be, because my son is on there. I need to see what
I watch TikTok, but there's a few of them that were like detailing Black people can't do nothing. They mentioned John Crawford. You can't go to Walmart. They mentioned Tamir Rice. You can't even be playing in the park with the damn toy gun like you used to be able to do. You can't be asleep in your bed like Breonna Taylor, right? Like, so don't sleep. You can't be sitting on a couch like, what was the brother's name? Botham, who's sitting on his couch.
John,
yeah, sitting on his couch in his own house,
eating ice cream, and the police, and then she lied and said she went into the wrong apartment.
She couldn't figure out her apartment.
Or
this other one can't figure out the difference between a taser and a gun. Right. Like, when are we going to start saying that some of these people are just too mediocre for their jobs? Like maybe this ain't for you. I don't
know if I fully believe them, but I mean, incompetence, yes. But to me, incompetence don't mean you don't still go to jail.
That's right.
I'm serious.
I know that is so true.
All right. It was a mistake. Okay, cool. All right. Then we got a law for that too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Incompetence in the United States, so especially incompetence in the classroom and in schools, actually does not go punished. It goes unpunished.
It goes unpunished.
We talked about qualified immunity for police officers. What I need my good liberal people who are out there beating that drum is to start thinking about the police father has a mother in the classroom. They have qualified immunity too. They are foreclosing on the black mind. Every day in classrooms, they are foreclosing on the black mind.
People are not ready for that conversation.
They are not ready.
I'm going to have to bring you back to talk about that, though. Seriously.
All right. Let's do it. Anytime.
Yeah, I want to talk about. I love that idea, the qualified immunity in the classroom. But you'd be surprised of the elected officials and so-called progressives who don't want to talk about that.
Well, I mean,
it's going to have to be the day to come. I'm serious.
One side of the aisle, they don't want to talk about it because policing, they're taking in police union money to get elected or whatnot. On the other side of they're taking
in teacher union money.
They're taking teacher union money in too. So
thanks, Chris. This is always
good
to have you on. And I know I've been on your platform a couple times, but I felt like this week lined up perfectly, and especially with your experience living in Minnesota, also being an elected in Minneapolis. I figured you had a really good perspective to offer, and you did, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, all that you're doing, the power that you're building, the example that you are setting about being fearless and saying the things that need to be said to me is everything. That's everything. That changes the game.
It sure does. We've got to at least start with truth. And then that's when we can hopefully move the ball forward. Thanks, Chris. Next week, we'll see you all same place, same time, Wednesdays at noon. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.